Now, watching all of this with me here in our live position overlooking St. Peter's Square, I'm joined by Monsignor Mark Langham from the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity, and Austen Ivereigh, founder of Catholic Voices. And delighted to have you both with us. This is quite a moment, isn't it, Mark Langham?
I was just down in the square and there's an electricity, a sense of history being made, moments that we'll never see again, something that brings people together, complete strangers are coming together and feeling the immense weight of these moments that mean so much to us as Catholics.
Yeah, and also these are things that we've never seen before.
To see these pictures from the Sistine Chapel is extraordinary and very moving, very momentous. It brings a human dimension to this otherwise very distant and ancient ceremony. Because, you know, the way that one would like to write about this is to talk about the intrigue and the plotting and the scheming. The visuals that you're presented with, the sound of the choir, it's very stirring.
I think the point about this and what it's showing very clearly is that this is actually a little bit like a liturgy. It's a very solemn thing. They're dressed in choir dress as they're asked to, as if they were attending a service. And so you have the sense that this isn't just a ballot, you know, it's much more than that. What they've been doing here, what they've been swearing, the oath, is actually to abide by all the norms and regulations of the conclave, and there are a lot of them, and they're all designed to ensure that freedom, to allow them to make that decision in peace.
It is also theatre, is it not?
The Catholic Church has some of the greatest theatre in the world. I think that reflects the momentousness of the occasion and the role of the papacy, how important it is, and that helps project for us the majesty, the importance, the antiquity of this role, its universal reach. It's very important these things are done well, in style, and in a way that people can somehow grasp the momentous nature of what's going on.
Monsignor Mark, I'm interested in that you use the word antiquity, because this is also showing, in a way, the modernity, isn't it? I mean, these extraordinary television pictures. I was here in Rome when Pope Benedict XVI left, and these extraordinary pictures of him flying in his helicopter low over Rome, over the Colosseum, over, you know, and over the kind of tourist sites of Rome. It was like something out of a promotional movie. And yet this was being done, presumably the Catholic Church are thinking, how can we project ourselves in a way that makes us look modern?
There's been a big move recently to broadcast in a new way what goes on and make it much more accessible. I'm amazed out in the streets of Rome talking to my neighbours where I live. They are able to feel a part of this conclave in a way they haven't in previous conclaves. These are Italians who've lived in Rome all their life, and this is a sense that's new for them of being part of what's going on.
I think the thing about this also is that, of course, it's a very, very old institution, the conclave. It goes back, you know, about 1,000 years. But that doesn't mean that it's somehow fossilized. It's always changing, it's always being modified, and it's always being updated. And in fact, even Benedict XVI, before he stood down, made a few modifications, for example, allowing the cardinals to choose the date of the conclave. Now we're getting it televised, and I think it's the same thing, but it keeps evolving according to the times.
Which is such an interesting observation, because what is going to happen next is that no one should know anything about it, and there's a sort of almost a blood-curdling declaration of secrecy with fear of excommunication should anything emerge.
Now, why is that? Because actually, throughout the history of papal elections, there's been an enormous amount of interference. See, what this thing is really about is allowing, it's a human process, but it's supposed to allow the Holy Spirit to act. But that can only happen when they have freedom from external interference. So, because of that long tradition, there's a lot of stuff about this must be secret, this must be private, this must be confidential. In fact, we often learn, sometime after conclaves, we often do learn what has happened inside them.
Yes, you're not meant to, but somehow
stuff comes out over time. Things come out over time. You know, we learn that a few votes went here initially before they went. We now know, for example, quite a lot about what happened in 2005. But what you're not told about, and this is very important, is about those negotiations, and the norms governing the conclave make it very clear that there should be no pacts, no agreements. The whole thing, the idea is to depoliticize the thing. They're supposed to vote for the man who, in conscience, and they say this before, you know, Michelangelo's Last Judgment, it's a very solemn thing, to really, I am choosing the person for the good of the church in conscience, uninfluenced by any other interests or pressures.
Yeah, that is the idea. I mean, how much of that do you think is realistic?
I think nowadays, actually, the modern conclave is, I don't know what Father Mark thinks, but I mean, nowadays I think it is largely an institution which actually it's also free from the kind of ideological or divisions that existed, for example, in the mid-20th century when there were liberals versus conservatives. Actually, this conclave, I don't see any of these kind of blocks. I see leaders from across, church leaders from across the globe gathering, getting to know each other, discussing the needs of the church and the needs of the time, and trying to come to a decision.
I think that's shown in the seriousness with which the pre-conclave discussions have taken place and the spirit with which they've taken place. These have been very intense but very fraternal discussions, and there's a real sense of pulling together for the good of the church to find the best person. Austen's quite right. You know, the reason for the strict rules is to give the cardinals space to make that decision in prayer and in tranquility for the good of the church. It is a momentous weight upon their shoulders, and they do need to feel they're not being pushed or interfered with. It's only, you know, a century ago that some religious, some political leaders had a veto over the election of the Pope. So I think this space that they have to be able to vote in tranquility is a very important thing.
And worth underlining again the unique circumstances in which we find ourselves here today. You know, they should be able to vote free, in tranquility, with the emeritus Pope in Castel Gandolfo still alive.
You see, it does change things a little bit, but what I don't think is that the ex-Pope, the emeritus Pope, is in any way overshadowing this. I think it's a completely free decision. But what you do have now is the possibility of a retired Pope, someone who is will be up the road from the new Pope, who is there, ready to listen and give advice if necessary. I think that just changes the dynamic. I think it makes possible, for example, the election of a much younger and less experienced Pope, for example.
Okay. Gentlemen, for the moment, thank you very much indeed for that, as we watch these pictures from live inside the Vatican, live inside the Sistine Chapel. It's sort of hard to believe you're saying this because we've never seen pictures like this before, as the cardinals file one by one, all 115 of them, the cardinal electors, to make their oath that they will choose the best person that they think. Let us go down into St. Peter's Square itself and join our correspondent Katia Adler, who is there for us. Katia.
Well, yes, of course, we're watching those amazing pictures of the cardinals dressed in scarlet on that incredible backdrop of the Michelangelo frescoes inside the Sistine Chapel. But here, let me show you a sea of colour as well in St. Peter's Square. Look at all of those umbrellas, and people are braving the horrible weather, actually, to come and watch that incredible oath, those pictures seen for the first time, those cardinals taking their oath of silence on those big screens here in the square. And it's very interesting, the mix of opinions actually inside the square. Some are faithful who want to be as close as possible to what is going on. There are also representatives of a victims organisation, the victims of child abuse by members of the clergy, pointing out that quite a number of those cardinal electors have been linked to that scandal, accused of covering up for members of the clergy, accused of abusing children. One of the big issues clouding the Catholic Church at the moment, including scandal in the Vatican, mishandling of funds in the Vatican Bank, and also accusations of individualism and competition within the Curia, the administration of the Vatican, something that Pope Benedict actually referred to on one of his last public speeches as well. He's called instead for the cardinals to act together like an orchestra, to work together, and of course they will have to work together to choose a new Pope. What of the new generation, though? Do they want to see a younger Pope? What kind of Pope would they like to see? Well, joining me now is Ilaria Vanni, a student from the Sapienza University here in Rome. You've come here to feel what's going on.
I think since I'm studying here, I would like to be there. It's an historical moment, so just have to take a look and see what happened.
Now, Pope Benedict was the first Pope to go on Twitter.
Yeah.
What kind of a Pope would you like to see, as well as a Twitter account? What would speak to the youth, because you're a young Catholic?
Yeah, with or without Twitter, I think it's good to have a modern Pope, someone who really cares about the poorest one, and not just all the symbols of church, like gold and habits.
Well, I mean, there are people leaving the Catholic Church here in Italy. I mean, there are inside the cardinals who'll be electing a new pope. There's an incredible amount of Italian cardinals, but even here in Italy, there are people leaving the church saying it's not relevant to their modern lives. What would make a pope relevant to you?
I mean, he has to have a very strong character with all that is happening to the world, the big crisis, and obviously, I mean, he has to be right in the side of people, not just from a balcony.
Ilaria Vanni, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you to you.
Ilaria spoke about the balcony that is behind us there in St. Peter's Square, with those red curtains ready for the new Pope to appear on the balcony and welcome, announce his presence to the city of Rome. He'll be Bishop of Rome, and to the rest of the world as well. But the countdown for the actually vote, as we know, is going on right now. So back to you, John.
Okay, Katia, thank you very much indeed, as we continue to watch these pictures coming to us from inside the Sistine Chapel. With me still here, Austen, Ivereigh, and I've been rejoined by Robert Mickens from the tablet. And Robert, let me haven't asked your reflection since we've started watching this process of them taking the oath. I mean, it's extraordinary, isn't it?
It really is, and just looking at the expression on the faces of many of these men, you can see them as they're waiting their turn, looking up at that magnificent fresco, the Last Judgment, the scenes of hell. You can only imagine what must be going through their minds, and what's in their hearts. They're certainly making one of the most monumental decisions and fulfilling one of the most serious duties of their entire life.
I bumped into my old boss, Cardinal Cormac Murphy O'Connor, earlier on the square, and I said to him, he must be relieved not to be doing this. And he said yes. I think a lot of cardinals feel the weight of this moment, and it's a very, very, very solemn responsibility.
Okay. I'm just wondering how many more cardinals. I guess, can we work this out in terms of, it's not going in age, is it? It's going in kind of the seniority of ranking of cardinals.
That's correct. I think we're now in the cardinal priests, and then afterwards will be the cardinal bishops, if I'm not mistaken.
I think it's cardinal bishops first, then the cardinal priests, and then the cardinal deacons. And I mean, it's a very old distinction here, these three ranks, but the bishops, the cardinal bishops, tend to be very senior bishops here in Rome. The cardinal priests on the whole are residential archbishops from around the world, and I think the cardinal deacons are mostly curial officials, again in Rome. So there was a time actually when I believe only the cardinal bishops were allowed to vote, and then it was extended.
And there's Cardinal Whirl, I think, from
that's
Washington.
Cardinal Whirl of Washington. That's right.
And one of the cardinals, I think, who were told by maybe they should be broadcasting a little less. I think when they kind of told that there was now that the period of the conclave was fast approaching, there was a sort of almost there.
Well, now Robert, who's American, is probably going to have a slightly different take, because the Americans do media very well, and the cardinals were busy doing press conferences each day. It was attracting more and more journalists, and none of the other cardinals, the European cardinals, weren't. So I think what happened inside, Robert might have a different take on this, what happened inside is the cardinal said, look, this is distorting the picture a bit, can we dial it down? And from then on, they held no more press conferences.
I think, John, what the idea was of the American cardinals was to be as transparent as possible. Obviously, they weren't giving away any of the secrets, which is kind of ironic, Austen, because it seems that Italians and others were giving the inside scoop to journalists in the press. But the Americans, I think, thought that it would be better if they gave journalists something. I mean, there are 4,500 extra journalists that have parachuted into Rome.
This does seem to be the balancing act that the Catholic Church is trying to maintain. On the one hand, total secrecy of the whole process of the conclave. On the other hand, wanting to put on a show for the world that the world can see, and we saw that with Benedict's departure, and we're seeing this now.
Well, one of the things is, the participation of the whole church, and it's a way to to bring people in. I mean, we saw there was a prayer service last Wednesday in St. Peter's Basilica. There was the Mass this morning. These are opportunities for all the world, all the people of God, as we say, all Catholics and non, to somehow participate. And even this, what we're watching right now, is offering people a chance to not just be spectators, but also be inside that chapel.
No, I think this is fantastic. I think it's wonderful that they're televising this. But, I mean, John, you're right, there is a tension, because while obviously they want to share as much as they can, allow Catholics to participate in this moment, and that's why these kind of visual images, of course, are vital, but they can't afford too much to allow too much openness about the discussions that they're happening, because what happens is people then start to play to the gallery. Remember, I was saying earlier, the whole object of this is to depoliticize the process. And so I think they've tried to get a balance in these discussions. They started off all talking to the press, and then they said, look, there comes a moment now where we need a few days of, you know, quiet reflection, discussions that are more private before going into the conclave.
Well, there we will leave it for the moment, as the cardinals continue their work in trying to make those individual oaths and declarations, and from the beauty of the Sistine Chapel to a filthy evening in Rome, because that is where our attention will be focusing next, because once everyone has left except for the cardinal electors, the focus won't be on what's going on inside the Sistine Chapel. It will be on that 6-foot-long chimney that has been erected over it, and our eyes will be firmly peeled there in the rain and the wind and the cold of a March Roman evening. But from here at the Vatican, it's back to you in the studio.